Hey everyone, it's Matt with BoLS, and I'm here with Adam.
Hey everybody.
And today we're going to talk about some of the changes you can expect in the new Age of Sigmar.
Yeah.
And right off the bat, we got the fancy Dominion box book.
Yeah.
And the core.
And this is just the core BRB. This is like you can only get this one in the Dominion starter box, the launch box, and then this one you'll be able to pick up later on. And just for reference too, we also grabbed the core book from the current edition, I guess, second edition, just to do some comparisons on stats and things like that, and talk about the big differences here. So we have copies of all the rules, and we're checking our numbers and going through them. Yeah.
So, right off the bat, between the book itself, is there any major differences?
Yeah, let's just stat-wise, right? So this book, the new book, is 360 pages. Both of these books are 360 pages. Functionally, they are the same. They only have different covers, the books there. There's about 40-ish pages of rules for the core rules section. Now, if you're familiar with Age of Sigmar 2.0, that's a pretty big jump in the number of pages, but having gone through all of the rules several times at this point, I can tell you that it's really just like they took the rules section from the old edition and kind of expanded everything out and made things a lot more clear. They didn't quite bullet point everything like they did for like 40K, for example, but they just kept they like explained everything a lot more in more detail.
So you'd say that this edition is perhaps a little more. The rules are explained a little more clearly and robust, you think?
Yeah, it's clear. I don't want to say they're not concise because they actually explain stuff. There's lots of examples, but they are clearer and cleaner, I would say, than previous editions. So a whole lot less room for ambiguity, hopefully.
Always good.
Yeah, especially for a rule set, right? And,
right.
Yeah, exactly. So that's really great. It's a solid... They took the foundation from 2.0 that they had, which was already a pretty good rule set, and they just kind of stretched out those rules and explained them better, which is great. There are some tweaks and changes to those rules, so it's not the exact same, but if you're familiar with Age of Sigmar 2.0 and you're playing 3.0, you'll be fine. Like, you'll pick up on the tweaks and changes, and you'll be able to go from there.
Is there any... If you had to pick one, is there any major singular change between 2 and 3?
Major singular change. I would actually start with command points. I think that's probably the biggest shift in the way command points are generated in there. So, yeah, let's just dive in. Let's talk about some of those changes.
Yeah, please.
So, I'm going to grab the book. We're going to read the command points real fast in the section here. You probably have seen these pop up on Games Workshop's website, but they're not all the entire rules section. So, it's on page 253 if you are watching this in the future and want to read along with us, but we're going to put it up on the screen for you too. The way command points work now, the big difference here is you receive command points at the start of the battle round after priority is determined, so you'll get 1 command point, right? In addition, if your general is on the battlefield at the start of the hero phase, you receive 1 command point, right? So, what that means is, terminology again is very clear here. A battle round is both player turns, right? So it's the whole thing. And then player turns are player A goes, player B goes. And then the turn sequence is broken down even further into 6 distinct phases, which you're probably familiar with. Hero phase, movement, shooting, charge phase, combat phase, and Battleshock phase. So the big thing there to note then is if you have your general on the board, you are going to get a command point at the start of the battle round, and then 1 point for each player phase. That's a big deal because that's a big change. The other big change for command points is at the end of the battle round, any command points that have not been used are lost. This is another big change in Age of Sigmar 2.0. You would accumulate the command points throughout the game, and then you'd have like the big turn where you spend a bunch of them. So now it's use them or lose them. Another shift to command points is when you determine priority, you do that again, same thing as before. You do that at the start of every turn. You'll determine who has priority for that turn. After determining who will take the turn, the player who will take the first turn, so first the top half of the turn, gets 1 command point, and the player who takes the second turn gets 2 command points.
Giving advantage to going second. or a balancing.
Yeah,
factor.
it's not. Yeah, exactly. It's not necessarily an advantage. It is a balancing factor. So again, doing some quick math. If you're the first player to activate the top player for the turn,
At the start of the round.
right? You get one at the start of the round. You get one in your hero phase. You'll get one in your opponent's hero phase. If you're the other player playing at the bottom, you'll get 2 points at the top of the round, 1 point in your opponent's hero phase, and 1 point in your hero phase. If your general's alive,
Right.
that's the big deal.
Which is going to be a real sort of shift in strategy if you have a really aggressive sort of commander. You know, maybe you don't want to charge in and just like, I'll kill as many as I can and then die.
Yeah,
because that's going to hurt you for the rest of the game.
If you don't have your general on the board, you're going to be missing those command points.
Sure.
Using command abilities has also changed. Each command ability, how they work now, you issue a command from the nominating either hero. Generals can do it. You can also issue commands from totems. Also, unit champions can now issue commands to their own unit only, though.
Sure.
The heroes can do commands out to 12 inches. Generals and totems are out to 18 inches. And, that's a big deal. You also have the nominating unit issues one command, and the receiving unit, it's just one unit now. So,
sure.
Yeah, so this is the guy giving the command, this is the person receiving the command, and that's it. You can also, a unit can only be affected by one command ability per phase, which is a big deal. So there's some armies right now, for example, in 2.0, they might save up 3 or 4 command points for turn 3, and then spend all of those command points on one unit to give them the super turn, right? For like your block of 40 dudes that charge in there with like +3 attack, +3 to hit, +2 to wound or whatever. And I'm making stuff up here, but it was like the big thing. That was a thing that is no longer an option.
So now that we've sort of talked on one of the biggest changes, let's just go break it down phase by phase, starting with hero phase. What's sort of changed in that department?
Right, great question. The hero phase now has heroic actions for your characters. So this is a new thing to the game. There's 4 different heroic actions: heroic leadership, heroic willpower, their finest hour, and heroic recovery. These abilities are specific to heroes, so they have to have the keyword hero on their war scroll. And a hero can use one of these at the start of the hero phase. They can do one ability, and I'm not going to read them off, but you can kind of see them on your screen right now. What they're going to do, they're all new abilities, and they just make your heroes feel more heroic. So it's a neat change.
Yeah, absolutely. Any sort of option to give different ways of how you want to utilize your heroes is something I'm always here for.
Absolutely, yeah. It makes your heroes feel more heroic, and
absolutely.
That's really cool.
All right, so what's next for movement phase?
Yeah, movement phase. This one was really just more of, I would say, cleaning up the language. For example, they've kind of parsed out normal move, retreat move, run move. Used to be in that movement section, it was all kind of jumbled together. Now it's, again, more parsed out, and they're all specific things. They're all different now, and they're all codified differently. I think the biggest change for the move section in general, though, is you can no longer do a retreat move and then run. So that was a thing you used to be able to do in 2.0. Now when you do a retreat move, you can choose to retreat or you can choose to run. You cannot do both. The other big change for movement is there's, again, heroic abilities command abilities you can use. At the double, that's the same thing where instead of rolling your run roll, you just you go 6 inches now. Sure. And then redeploy is a new one. This one's pretty tricky. I'm going to read it because it's new and interesting. This command ability is used in the enemy movement phase. After an enemy unit finishes a normal move, run, or retreat, the unit that receives this command must be within 9 inches of the enemy unit and more than 3 inches away from all enemy units. You make a d6 move with the unit that receives the command, but it must finish the move more than 3 inches away from all enemy units and cannot shoot later in that turn. So what that means
That's a doozy.
Yeah, let's say Matt moved up a unit of orcs and my stormcasts are now. You want to charge me?
Sure.
Let's say you're right at 9 inches away, and I think it's going to be a long bomb charge. So I'm going to use the redeploy ability. I'm going to roll that dice. I'm not within 3 inches of any other unit, but you're within 9 inches of me. I'm going to roll that d6, and I'm going to move backwards away from you. 6 inches. So now that charge is now 9 plus whatever that d6 roll.
So it's a reactive retreat.
Exactly. Or it's a reactive redeploy, because what if you move up, but I'm not on the objective anymore, and the objective's in the middle of the phase. I'm going to roll that d6 and try to get you... Say I'm on the objective, right? And I don't want you to get within 6 inches of the objective.
Push up a little bit.
So I push up a little bit so that when you come in, you can't get to the objective. So there's some cool ways to use that redeploy besides just running away. So try to think about that when you're playing. So it's a really cool ability now.
That's very interesting. I like that a lot.
Yeah, it's a neat little trick. Yeah. But yeah, the movement phase, other than those major changes, I think will feel very similar.
Great. All right. Shooting. What's up there?
Yeah, shooting. It's very similar. I think the largest change probably going to be Lookout, Sir. Just read this rule real fast. You must subtract 1 from hit rolls for attacks made with a missile weapon if the target is an enemy hero within 3 inches of an enemy unit that has 3 or more models, not wounds, but models. The Lookout, Sir rule does not apply if the enemy hero has a wounds characteristic of 10 or more. That was one of the big changes there. They do have some new command phase abilities here. Forward to Victory. That's the same one. You can reroll your charges. And then Unleash Hell. This is a new reactive one. You can use this command ability after an enemy unit finishes a charge move. The unit that receives the command must be within 9 inches of that enemy unit and more than 3 inches from all other enemy units. So if you're going to use this ability, you need to use it on the first charge, not the second one, because the first one will make it so that you're
within 3. Sure.
Yeah. It's Overwatch. The unit that receives the command can shoot in that phase. So again, this is happening during the charge phase, not the combat phase or the shooting phase now. But when it does so, when it shoots, you must subtract 1 from hit rolls for its attacks, and it can only target the unit that made the charge. So again, Unit A is sitting here, Matt's orcs, B and C are charging me. I can't wait for C to complete the charge if B is going first. I've got to shoot B.
Right.
And again, because you can only use 1 command ability, a unit can only be the target of 1 command ability per phase.
You can't be doing it on every unit that's coming in.
Yeah, you can't do it every time. First off, you're not going to have enough command points. And secondly, you can't use it on Unit A or Unit B and then also on Unit C. You can only be affected by 1 per phase.
Right.
So that's a cool one. Also, keep in mind you can't use Unleash Hell and then also try to do the redeploy because you can't shoot during that turn now.
That's within the wording of...
Yep.
Okay.
And can't shoot later in that turn too. So keep that in mind. And again, turn is player, not round.
Not battle round, which is the full...
Yeah.
Both players' turns.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right.
So that's the shooting phase in a nutshell.
And combat.
Combat, yeah, good question. Really, combat's gonna work the same.
Sure.
There's one big call I want to make, and then I will mention that the first strike and last strike effects have all been parsed out, so they're more clear and more easily to remember. How I like to think about it, and I'm kind of shortcutting here. There's basically 3 initiative steps: units with strike first, units that don't have anyone, and then units that have strike last. The other big change, and I think this is going to be more impactful for single model big monster units. This is actually going to make them a little harder to lock down. Is the change to pile-in. So I'm going to read the rule real fast. You can move a model making a pile-in move up to 3 inches. That hasn't changed. When you make a pile-in move with a model, it must finish the move no further from the nearest enemy unit than it was at the start of the move. It used to be nearest enemy model. So what does that mean? What does that mean? I have a Gargant in base to base with Grot A, but I can now no longer be touching Grot A if I move him in contact with Grot D down the line 3 inches away.
Gets rid of some of that pile-in shenanigans that were...
It makes it a little...
somewhat prevalent.
Yeah. So it does a lot of things. This rule is a big change. You won't be able to lock down certain units the way, unless you completely envelop them. Right. It used to be if a model was in base-to-base contact, they had to stay in base-to-base, so you had to basically slide around. But that model had to stay, because you couldn't be any closer, or you couldn't be any farther away than base-to-base. But as long as you're still touching, you're good to go. Now it's the whole unit. I just have to have these models in contact with the unit. I think this change is a big deal because of the coherency changes in the game, which we've seen. You've probably seen those already, and that just says that if a unit has 5 or less models, you just have to be within 1 inch of a friendly model from the same unit. If it's units more than 5 models, though, you have to be within 1 inch of 2 or more models. Those are the big things in the combat phase: the strike first, strike last stuff, and then the pile-in moves. Everything else is essentially the same. Oh, this is a big change, actually. The hit rolls, wound rolls, save rolls, and things like that. So there are caps now on the modifiers, which is a big deal, right? So hit roll is capped at +1 or -1 for modifiers. Same with the wound roll, +1 or -1. The save roll, you are capped at a +1, but you are not capped on the negatives.
So you can rend.
Exactly. Rend still works the way you think it works. And then, that's the big one.
Yeah. So, that's strategy-wise for a lot of armies. That's a huge, huge deal. Yeah,
that is a big change. Very important.
Lastly, Battleshock.
Yeah, Battleshock. The only thing, I don't even think this is new per se, but it's now spelled out in more detail, is that for slain models, if you have some way to regen those models, the models that were slain still count towards the Battleshock check number.
Sure.
So I have a 10-man unit, I lose 5 of them, but have an ability and bring back 3 of them. I'm not down 2, I'm still down 5.
Sure.
For Battleshock purposes. And then the end of the round is after Battleshock checks and all that stuff goes through. So hasn't changed too much. So again, those are the 6 main phases of the game. Let's talk into some of the more generic stuff now.
Sure.
Okay, so terrain and cover has changed a little bit. The rules for cover are closer to what they were in older editions of like Warhammer Fantasy. Currently in 2.0, it's kind of tough to get cover because you have to every model has to be within 1 inch of the cover, and it's whatever. Now there's an actual like checklist to be behind cover to count as having cover for being behind it. The target unit is more than 3 inches away from the attacking unit, so this is basically shooting. All of the models in the target unit are within 1 inch of the terrain feature, so that's a check mark there. And it is impossible for the attacker to draw a straight line from the closest model of a unit in the attacking unit to the closest point of a model in the target unit without that line passing across the terrain feature. So you're measuring closest to closest, and if that goes through terrain and it meets the other requirements, you are considered behind terrain and therefore get the add 1 to the save for being in cover. All
right, so that's all for terrain?
Yeah, pretty much. Again, any major changes, most of the stuff is pretty much the same.
All right, well, what about objectives? Any major changes there?
Yeah, objectives are now clarified, like we've been saying. You measure from the center of an objective. So your objective can be however big you want to make it or whatever. You're always measuring from the center. So I probably wouldn't make my objectives more than 6 inches in diameter or radial, whatever, because you're always measuring from that center point. So,
right, and that'll give a lot more versatility just in terms of what terrain feature you're using or whatever. You don't have to worry about it being whatever size.
Yeah, you can use a building. You're measuring from the center of the building now for the objective.
Yeah.
A lot of folks use coins or poker chips or whatever. You're still measuring from the center for that 6 inches.
You're not losing anything by using something simple, which
is
nice.
Or if you want to get fancy and have like a cool feature, custom objective marker thing that's like a crazy tower, I don't know, whatever you want to do. One other thing about that is, and this is kind of also based on the battle plans, it's objective marker control. After setup is complete but before the first battle round begins, each player gains control of all objectives that are within 6 inches of any friendly models and more than 6 inches from all enemy models. This is a big change. Because now it's at the start of the game, essentially, before the first battle round, you do...
Everything in your area becomes yours.
Right, so a lot of folks you might remember from like 2.0, you'll deploy on the objective and then have to wait until the end of the turn to claim it. Now at the start of the game, if you start on top of an objective, or within 6 inches of an objective, you do claim it and can now move off of it during your turn. And I think it's a good change.
Yeah, that seems like a great quality of life change.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's just, again, that's a big deal for objectives. Wizards are have a couple of tweaks. There's a couple that I want to mention. Arcane Bolt is now weird. So again, you cast spells in the hero phase, right? Arcane Bolt, however, casting value 5 is only range 12 now, so that's shrunk. If you're successfully cast at the start of any one phase before your next hero phase, you can pick one enemy unit within range, 12 inches, and visible to the caster. That unit suffers 1 mortal wound. And then, if the unit is within 3 inches of the caster, it suffers 3 mortal wounds instead of 1. There's no more, did I roll 10 plus or 12 plus? Do I do D3 mortal wounds? Now it's just 1 unless they're within 3 inches of you. Oof. However, you can cast the spell in the hero phase, move, charge, and then release it.
Because
it's again at the start of any one phase before your next hero phase.
That's interesting.
Endless spells are weird and wonky now too. First off, when you take an endless spell, it's 1 per wizard in your army. Okay. So that's a change. You used to be able to buy however many they cost points, you'd buy them, whatever. But now you can take a endless spell based on the number of wizards you have. Wizards control the endless spell as long as it's within 30 inch. If it can move, as long as they're within 30 inches of it. Dispelling it really hasn't changed too much, other than priests can now dispel. Okay. So that's a thing. Okay, another big change is for dispelling how dispelling endless spells work. This isn't really a change so much as just more of a clarification. I'm just going to read it real quick and we'll dissect it. At the start of the hero phase, each player can attempt to dispel 1 endless spell for each friendly wizard and friendly priest. The players whose turn is taking place makes all of their spelling attempts first. So you do all of your dispels first. If a wizard attempts to dispel an endless spell, they can attempt to cast or unbind 1 fewer spells in that hero phase. So you know how many spells or unbinds you have left during that hero phase. If a priest attempts to dispel an endless spell, they can chant 1 fewer prayer in that hero phase. Same thing. The same player cannot attempt to dispel the same endless spell more than once per phase. It's the same thing. You still roll 2d6. If the roll is greater than the casting value of the spell, it's dispelled and removed from play. An endless spell cannot be summoned again in the turn that it was removed from play. Again, player turn. This prevents players from doing stuff like summoning a spell portal or dispelling a spell portal from last turn to recast it again this turn. There's a lot of that going around. Like Bellwind Vortex. I'm going to dispel my Bellwind Vortex and move it or cast it after I've done stuff. So it's just a clarification there. So
give some consistency, which is the theme of this whole edition, to actually getting to dispel something and having it stick.
Right, and that's nice. It's you feel like you actually accomplished something.
Right. Yeah, there's nothing more frustrating than doing something and then it immediately gets canceled.
A couple of the changes too. Predatory endless spells. This gets a little bit weirder. You probably have seen the previews already, but we'll go through this part pretty quick. Players, when a wizard casts a predatory endless spell, they are in control of it as long as it's within 30 inches of them, and they get to move it during both hero phases. If they're wild, then players will go alternating who gets to move the wild spells first. So, yeah, that's pretty much it for... It makes them better. I think it makes predatory endless spells scarier because they get to move twice instead of just once at the start of the battle round. Now they're going to move in each player's turn in the hero phase. So priest can basically do one prayer per priest, and you can't double up on the same prayer. So sorry, Corn. I know that's going to suck for you guys because you can't do the blood thing like from three different priests and do it. Yeah.
I think are getting sort of bumped up to where wizards were.
Yeah, in a way, they fill a similar role, and now they're So a little bit of overlap. They do suffer from divine wrath. Not all priests have this, but now it is universal. Which is if you roll an unmodified 1 when you're chanting a prayer, you suffer a mortal wound. So you made your god angry, and they smited you a little bit. There are 2 new prayers, and these are kind of generic. There's Bless, which goes off on a 4+, on a 4, so 4 better on the die. Range value of 12. You pick a friendly unit wholly within range, invisible, and until the start of your next phase, that unit has a ward of 6+. So wards again affect mortal wounds and regular wounds.
Mm-hmm.
So and there's also smite, and this allows you. It only goes off on a 2, by the way, so it's pretty easy to do.
Nice.
Range of 48 inches. If answered, pick an enemy priest within that range, invisible to the caster or the prayer, the priest, and the enemy priest suffers 1 mortal wound. If you roll a 6 or more somehow, the enemy priest suffers D3 mortal wounds instead of 1. So smite that heretic.
Any major changes with monsters?
Yeah, we mentioned this a little earlier in this section. Monsters have now a rampage table, which we'll show you on the screen here. Mm-hmm. You can see that the Roar, Stomp, Titanic Duel, and Smash to Rubble. You guys can read those. I think my favorite thing, though, is the Smash to Rubble, which allows you to destroy. You pick one faction terrain feature or defensible terrain feature within 3 inches of the model and roll a die on a 3+. The terrain feature is demolished, which is great. Which basically, there's a lot of factions out there that have their own terrain features, like faction-specific terrain features, mm-hmm. and now you have a way to actually get rid of them.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a nice change. But the other stuff, too, does make monsters more monstrous, which is a theme, too. Yeah.
Right.
Other than that, core rule-wise, there's not a ton of other stuff for, like, War Scrolls or, like, the dissection of War Scrolls and things like that. That's pretty much all the same. There is one thing for list building, which we're going to talk about now and then talk about again when we talk about match play rules, which is the reinforced unit. And this is a big change. I'm going to read the rule, and we'll put it on the screen for you. A reinforced unit has twice as many models as its minimum unit size. If you can include reinforced units in your army, you can reinforce units with the battle line battlefield roll twice. A unit that is reinforced twice has 3 times as many models as the minimum unit size and counts as 2 units towards the number of reinforced units you can include in your army. If the description for a unit says that it is a single model, it cannot be reinforced. So, reinforcement points or reinforced units are based on the limits are based on the game size for match play. In a typical 2,000 point game, you can have 0 to 4 reinforced units in your army.
So is this going to bring down unit sizes for like big horde armies?
Probably.
Yeah.
Probably. I think it's just going to be a bigger change. It's kind of like no longer putting all your eggs in one basket.
Yeah. Yeah.
With the changes to command abilities, where a unit can only be affected by 1 command ability per phase, and the smaller unit sizes, you're less incentivized to have that alpha strike plan of like that unit of 40 is going to get all the buffs on turn 3 and then wreck your face.
Yeah.
So you have to play a little bit more tactically, I think. Again, I'm talking specifically for match play. So open play, narrative play, it's still the same. There are points involved for open play now too. So that if you like playing how you're currently playing, your army you're currently playing, you can always play open play. If your opponent agrees to do that, so have fun with it.
And if you're just playing with friends, just do whatever you want.
Yeah.
Who cares?
Whatever. Another big change is the battalions. I'm sure that this is floated around the internet by now. People have been talking about it already. Core battalions are new to the game, and these are there's 6 kind of generic battalions. We'll put them up on the screen for you. Warlord, Battle Regiment, Grand Battery, Vanguard, Linebreaker, and Command Entourage. They are specific loadouts, kind of like old Force Org, if you remember that, right? From 40K. For example, Battle Regiment, this is probably going to be the most popular one. You can have 1 commander and up to 2 sub-commanders. You have to have at least 2 troops with up to 5 total troops, and you can include 1 artillery piece and up to 1 monster. That is a behemoth that is not a leader. If you do that for this particular battalion, the battalion ability is called Unified, and this is a 1-drop deployment. What that means is you have to deploy. When you start deploying any unit from the battalion, everything gets dropped. So there's going to be some armies out there who are going to build a specific regiment just so they can do the 1-drop and maybe get the priority during match play, because in match play specifically, you don't roll for first turn. It's whoever finishes deploying first gets to go first. And again, that is a match play specific thing. The other big thing in match play specifically is that for battalions, you can only include core battalions in your army. you can no longer include War Scroll battalions. So if you have your army book and it's got that really cool battalion that you always run, that's like, I don't know, I'm thinking of Sylvaneth or something, but like Dryka and 2 units of Revenants, and they got like +1 to their rend on stuff. Mm-hmm. You can't use that battalion anymore for match play. You can only use those core battalions for match play now. So again, match play only.
Yeah, so, yeah, just trying to rein in more of those outlier cases.
It's a double-edged sword. This is definitely going to impact some armies more so than others, but War Scroll battalions certainly felt like a case of the haves and the have-nots. Right. Some War Scroll battalions were really good. Now nobody has access to your War Scroll battalions for match play. I think that this changes up kind of the interplay of list building now. There are list building restrictions now. Again, the reinforcement units, the core battalion options there. It's going to force players to, first off, reevaluate their current lists and then try to rebuild them using the new configurations. Endless spells do have a limit, again, based on the game size. For a standard 2K game, you can have up to 3. So even if you have 15 wizards, Lumineth, you can only take 3 endless spells or invocations. Allies, same deal. That's still a 2K 400 point kind of maximums for allied units. Interestingly enough, in match play specifically, it says allied units do not count towards the number of battle line units in your army, but that's a match play specific rule. So if you want to have open or narrative play and you have battle line units from some other allied faction, they count towards your battle line unit. But again, just want to mention that this is a match play specific thing. The game sizes, board sizes, let's talk that for a second. Sure. Those changed. These recommended minimums, again, keyword recommended.
Play however minimum, you want.
But these are probably going to become the standards, let's be honest. For games of up to 1,000 points, it's 30 inches by 44 inches, which works out to be like one of the kill team. I was looking around for it, but one of the kill team boards is rough, like 2 of those.
Sure.
And then for basically 1,500 to 2K, maybe even 1,000. So it's kind of a band, as you can see on the chart there. It's 44 by 60 inches, which is slightly smaller than the typical 4x6 table you're playing on. And then for 3K, they recommend 44 inches by 90 inches. If you notice, the thing that stays the same the whole time is that 44 inches, and that's your basically your width across. So 4 feet. Well, minus 2 inches, minus 4 inches. Right. Yeah,
that makes sense.
Grand strategies are new.
Sure.
I haven't seen too much on this one yet, so I do want to talk about them. Grand strategies. You pick one grand strategy from the list below and record on your army roster. So this is before you even show up to the table. So this is during the list building part of it. There's Sever the Head, Vendetta, and Hold the Line. And these trigger at the end of the battle. If you've completed your Grand Alliance strategy, you get 3 additional VPs. Wow. Right? So Sever their Head, when the battle ends, you complete this grand strategy if there are no heroes from your opponent's starting army on the battlefield. You gotta kill all of their heroes. Vendetta, you complete this one if the model chosen to be your opponent's general has been slain and the model chosen to be your general has not been slain.
Sure.
So instead of killing all the heroes, you have to kill the general and keep your general alive. And then Hold the Line. When the battle ends, if there are any battle line units from your starting army on the battlefield. So the reason that it calls out starting army because it doesn't include summoned units.
Sure. Okay.
But if you have 3 units of 10 because of the reinforcement restrictions for your your Grots. I'll keep going back to Matt's Grots. But let's say you have a unit of 20 Grots, 3 units of 20 or whatever, and as long as one of them battle line units stays alive the entire game, you're good. You get those 3 victory points.
And this is all done, like you mentioned, during list building.
Yeah.
So I don't know necessarily who I'm going up against when I choose this grand strategy.
Yep. This is, again, it says specifically record it on your army roster. Mm-hmm. The other thing, so that's the grand strategies. The other way to get VPs besides the objectives are battle tactics. This is another new thing, too.
Okay.
So at the end of your turn, after determining the control of objectives, you score 2 victory points if you completed this battle tactic. So how this works, at the start of your hero phase, you pick one of the battle tactics from this list below. You must reveal your choice to your opponent, and if your battle tactic instructs you to pick something, you must tell your opponent what you pick. So no secret knowledge there.
Sure.
You have until the end of the turn to complete the battle tactic. You cannot pick this battle tactic more than once per battle. So you can see the list there on your screen. There are 6 options. Some of them are going to be easier to complete than others.
Sure.
But again, you start these on the first turn of the first hero phase. At the start of your hero phase, you pick one. So be aware of that. And again, they are worth 2 VPs at the end of the turn if you completed it. So that's a way to rack up some serious points.
Absolutely.
Over the course of a typical 5.5 turn game. That's 10 VPs on the line.
I think players are going to start to get really weird with their lists.
Yeah.
Because they're going to have options to use these tactics and grand strategies to do weird things and build a list sort of with that in mind.
Yeah.
And I'm really excited to see some of the, again, more weird lists that come out of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is going to be a huge meta shift just in general for Age of Sigmar. Mm-hmm. There's no way that the game meta is going to be the exact same from 2.0 to 3.0
right.
for matched play.
Right.
I want to keep reiterating that. This introduces a whole brand new thing called enhancements. They get a little weird, but essentially, currently in 2.0, how it works is you get your faction or sub-factions allegiance abilities, their artifacts of power. If they have an artifact of power, you have to choose that artifact of power first, typically when you're building. Same with command traits, prayers, mount traits, all that stuff. The new way they're doing it, there are, and you can see on your screen now, there's a bunch of universal enhancements for command traits, universal artifacts of power, spell lores, universal prayer scripture, and universal triumphs. The big one I want to talk about is the universal triumphs. There's no longer a chart you roll on. If you have a triumph, you can pick the specific one that you want. And for triumphs specifically, you can pick one triumph for your army. Each triumph you pick can be used only once per battle and can only be used if the points total of your army is less than that of your opponent's army. So I'm 30 points down from Matt, so I get to use my triumph ability that I now get to pick instead of having to roll. Which this is a huge deal for lots of armies. Some of these, there's certain armies that are like immune to Battleshock, and then there's the Indomitable one. Like, if you take this, you can just say it's Indomitable, and then you don't have to. They won't flee during the Battleshock test. Well, if you're already immune to Battleshock, you don't care about that one. And when you rolled that triumph, it was a waste of the 30 points that I didn't spend. But now I can actually pick one. So that's another list building thing that you can do to make it more interesting. Mm-hmm. There's other weird stuff with the enhancements. For example, spell lore. If you take the spell lore enhancement, you can pick one spell for each wizard in your army from any of the spell lores available to that wizard. And this includes every wizard in your army gets one extra spell with that enhancement. Same for prayers if you pick that one. So it doesn't change the number of spells they can cast per turn. Just gives them more options.
Sure. I mean, still.
Yeah. Artifacts of power. Again, heroes can't have more than one artifact of power, but that enhancements allow you to take an additional one. And I think that's pretty much it. But yeah, there's the new unique enhancements, and it's just extra options, more generic stuff.
Yeah.
For you. Well, folks, yeah.
that was a lot.
Yeah, there's a lot of changes. I know we hammered on this a lot. I want to say it one more time. A lot of these changes were match play specific, so take it easy in the comments on those. We didn't write the rules, so don't blame us. Yeah, I think overall these are some healthy changes for the game, for the meta.
Absolutely.
I would also say that, like we mentioned, it kind of reins in a lot of options.
This is, I think, going to really increase the longevity of how the game plays without getting very meta-y and stale. Like, I think this really will make it easier to try different weird builds and give the viability to a lot more different armies.
Absolutely. I think you're going to see the players really get to experiment with their armies and their builds now. Again, match play specific. Essentially, again, the core rules, while they look way longer and way more complicated, it's basically the same game with the rules explained a little bit better, drawn out a little bit more. more examples, less ambiguity, and I think that's healthy for the game.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, go try it out. It's a lot of fun. It looks really fun.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah. So those are all the major changes. I'm sure we probably missed a couple, but those are the ones that I think were worth note. What do you think, Matt?
I'm definitely excited to jump into some games. I really enjoyed second edition for sure.
Yeah.
For just how straightforward it was, and for this edition to really sort of streamline like we've been saying, the ambiguity of the rules. I think it'll be a lot easier, especially to bring in new players.
Yeah, I think it's very it's going to be very friendly to new players. Everything's spelled out a lot better, and I don't think you're going to need that like tribal knowledge that game groups might have for stuff. You can read these rules, pick up on how to do stuff. Everything's step by step almost, and then you just jump in and start rolling some dice. So I'm looking forward to 3.0, and I hope you are too. So
all right, so signing off, I'm Matt,
and I'm Adam,
and we'll see you next time.
Thanks.
Bye.
Click to subscribe. Check out more videos. And thanks for watching.